Okay, so just to give you guys a few more examples, I'm going to work a couple of problems in this section of your 5.3 notes where you are combining operations with fractions. And then I'm going to work a couple from the last section, the application problems, the word problems. And then remember, anything that I don't work through with you in person, you can find the solutions in the completed notes. And I did get those posted for you this morning in D2L. All right, so again, just kind of picking up where we left off, I did a couple of examples with addition and subtraction, finding common denominators. And this is the next section where you're going to also have to remember your order of operations. All right, so I'm going to look at this one with you right here, where we've got addition and we've also got addition addition and division. There we go. All right, so looking at this problem right here, again, you've got two things that need to be done. And so you have to remember your order of operations. Multiplication and division come before addition and subtraction in your order of operations pyramid. So what that means is I need to work through this part first. All right, so remember, when you are dividing by a fraction, you keep the first one as it is. You change from division to multiplication, and you flip the second fraction. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and work through this. 5 times 3 is 15 in the numerator, 12 in the denominator. And remember, simplify your fractions if you can. So both of these are going to be divisible by 3. And so that means that this fraction will simplify to 5/4. Now remember, what we just worked out is this part right here. So now I've got to go back and finish this problem with the addition, all right? Do the division first, then the addition. So I'm looking at 4/9 plus, and then the division that I just worked out is 5/4. So now that I'm at addition, remember with addition and subtraction, you must have a common denominator. So if I look at multiples of 4 and 9, right, those are my denominators. I'm going to list them out until I find something that they have in common. All right, so multiples of 4, multiples of 9. All right, nothing yet, so I'm going to keep going. All right, let's extend 9 times 4. And then there we finally have 1 in common. Sometimes the best you can do in terms of a common denominator is the product of the two denominators, and this is one of those cases. If you can find something smaller, that's better to use, but if nothing else, you can use the product of the two denominators, which means I'm going to rewrite each of these with a denominator of 36. So, looking at what has to happen, all right, that first denominator is a 9. To make it 36, it's got to be multiplied by 4. So whatever I do to the denominator, I've also got to do to the numerator. So that 4 will also be multiplied by 4, and this becomes 16/36. The second denominator is a 4. To become 36, it's got to be multiplied by 9. So I've got to do the same thing to my numerator. That means that 5 also has to be multiplied by 9. And so this second fraction is going to become 45/36. And now that we have a common denominator, we keep the common denominator. We add the numerators together. 16 plus 45 is going to give me 61. This cannot be simplified any further. And so my final answer here would be 61/36. You could technically write that as a mixed number if you needed to, since it is an improper fraction, but technically either of those forms would be okay. All right, so with these problems on this page, again, just be careful about your order of operations. Make sure multiplication and division are done before addition and subtraction. All right, so I'm going to work through one more with you here, and I want to look at this last one that has some whole number values in there and some parentheses. All right, so remember, with parentheses, you always work out what's in parentheses first. And because we have subtraction and addition in parentheses, we're going to have a common denominator. So what you want to remember is when you're dealing with fractions and you have a whole number, all right, it's equivalent to that number over 1. Okay, so write it that way because it's going to make it easier to figure when you go to look at your common denominator. And if one of the denominators is 1, you know that your common denominator can just be the other denominator, right? Because you can get to anything with a multiple of 1. So that means in parentheses here, I'm going to write each of these with a denominator of 9. All right, so in this first fraction, the denominator was 1. To become 9, it has to be multiplied by 9. And that means the same thing will happen to the 3. And notice when you write that 27 over 9, right, 27 divided by 9 is 3. So you know you've written that correctly. And then the second fraction here doesn't have to change at all. I mean, technically you could say this 9 has to be multiplied by 1. But if you don't change the denominator, then you in turn don't have to change the numerator. Okay, so I've written those with a common denominator. I'm going to do the same thing over here. And again, if one of the denominators is 1, your common denominator is just going to be the other one. All right, and then same thing, rewrite. This 1 needs to become a denominator of 3, so that's multiplying by 3. And so I'm going to have to do the same thing to my numerator. And again, notice 12 divided by 3 is 4. So you know you've written that correctly. Second fraction is not changing. Denominator stays 3, so numerator stays 2. All right, so now that I have common denominators, I can work out what's in parentheses. All right, keep the common denominator of 9, and 27 minus 4 is 23. This is going to be divided by, and now I'm going to work out what's in parentheses over here. Common denominator is 3. What's in the numerator, 12 plus 2, is going to be 14. All right, and then the last step here, dividing by a fraction. Keep the first, change to multiplication, flip the second. Now, a little shortcut here. If you have common factors between your numerator and your denominator, you can go ahead and divide those out here, or you can wait until you get to the end. And I find it's a little bit easier to go ahead and do it as an intermediate step. So what I mean by that is when I look right here, there's a common factor between the numerator of 3 and the denominator of 9. It's a 3. So I'm going to go ahead and divide each of those by 3 to go ahead and do my simplification here. So 3 divided by 3 is 1. 9 divided by 3 is 3. And then that just makes this a little bit simpler when I multiply, because 23 times 1 is just 23, and 3 times 14 is 42. And notice, because I've already simplified, that won't simplify any further. Now, if that confuses you, you can always wait until the end. All right, in other words, you could leave it a 3 and a 9. You could say, well, 23 times 3 is 69. 9 times 14 is 126. It's just going to be a little bit more difficult to simplify because these are bigger numbers. So sometimes it's a little bit harder to figure out what that common factor is. But once you find it, each of these are divisible by 3. And when you simplify this fraction, 69 divided by 3 is 23. 126 divided by 3 is 42. And so notice I'm getting to the same place. It's just, one I simplify when I'm multiplying. The other I simplify when I get to the end. Either one is okay. All right. So again, the rest of these watch your order of operations, watch your common denominators, but work through these other examples and then check your solutions with my completed notes in D2L.